right, community of faith. We doing all right today? All right. Glad you're joining us at home. We're glad. We're in our second week of making marriage work. Laura and I have been married over 40 years now. And so for some of you newbies, I have a little quiz I put together. This might help you in your marriage. You ready? Number one, when your wife says, let's not get each other Christmas presents this year, it indicates her desire to share with the less fortunate. Or B, her thoughtful and realistic interest in the household budget. Or C, a test to see if you love her enough to forget the suggestion and surprise her with something you'll be paying off till Columbus Day. C. Number two, before answering the question, does this outfit make me look fat? What should a husband always remember? His wife's feelings are the most important thing. B, she may have spent hours shopping and putting that outfit together. Or C, the couch is lumpy, and when you sleep on it, a spring pokes you in the back. Yeah, C. Your husband puts on his high school letter jacket and finds he can no longer snap it up. A wife's best response is, well, maybe it shrunk. Or B, I like you a little less skinny. Or C, that jacket would look dumb on a bald guy anyway. Number four, your spouse is snoring. You should A, accept it as a minor flaw in an otherwise perfect mate. B, gently nudge him and say, roll over, dear. Or C, put a pair of sweatpants over his head and tighten the drawstring. Number five, when riding with your husband on long car trips, use the hours of quiet time to A, discuss meaningful topics, B, point out the beauty of the scenery, or C, excitedly warn him of impending highway danger that you can barely see as a tiny speck on the horizon. And then lastly, number six, if a long-time married couple is in the bathtub together, it can only mean A, they still feel passionately about each other, B, their love life is spontaneous and exciting, or C, he's grouting some loose tile while she tries to get rid of stubborn soap scum. Well, marriage is the most challenging relationship we will ever have. And the reason why is there is a pattern in all of us, a pattern of selfishness that is so deeply woven into the pattern of our lives that we truly don't know how selfish we are until we get married. I mean, much of dating is pretending to be someone you're not. Ladies, you had no idea how gaseous he was, right? While you were dating, but now you know. Gary Thomas, the author of Sacred Marriage, says it takes between 9 and 14 years for a couple to become not entirely unselfish, but rather less selfish and begin to shift from me to we. And one of the best ways, he says, that we can start making that shift is to focus on serving one another. And here's the thing, incompatibility, which is the number one reason listed for divorce, incompatibility is a given. Why are we incompatible? We think, process, communicate differently. We come from different backgrounds, different families, different experiences. We have different personalities. We're different in every way. We have different wounds, different scars from life. Don't you think God knew when he put you together with that spouse that you were incompatible? He did. You see, marriage puts pressure on you to become more than you thought you could ever be. Marriage is a constant death and resurrection. And it's a dying to ourselves and seeking to serve the other person. A lot of you are thinking, I know, I mean, it's too much. I just can't do it. But if you'll allow it to, marriage can drive you to God. I mean, there are literally hundreds of us in this room right now that can tell you how the first time we came to Community of Faith, it was because there was a marriage message, and how we came into relationship with God. And then we can tell you about the miracles that God performed in our marriage. Because you see, when you become a believer, there's a new power. Let me just read you what Paul, the apostle, said in Philippians 2:13. He says, God, who is at work within you, will give you the will. He'll give you the want to, and he'll give you the power to achieve his purpose. And you say, well, I just feel so weak right now. Well, look at 2 Corinthians 12:9. Paul again, I am with you, God says. That's all you need. My power shows up best in weak people. So get ready for the miracle. Are you ready to dig in? When we finally discovered attachment theory, Laura and I realized our lessons in love did not start with marriage. They started in infancy and they lasted all those years growing up with our parents. Our experiences growing up, good and bad, left a lasting impression, an imprint on our souls that determined our beliefs, our expectations about how to give and receive love. Finally, I understood what Paul was talking about in that great love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, when he was talking about how love is an action that we do. Love is patient, love is kind. Love doesn't seek its own way. It's not a feeling, it's an action. But then right in the middle of it, suddenly it seems like he shifts subjects and he says, when I was a child, I spoke and thought and reasoned as a child, but when I grew up, I put away childish things. Childish things. The things we learned in childhood. Finally, I knew why I was always pursuing Laura and she was always distancing from me. Why I was always gauging the temperature of our relationship and trying to connect, but connection was so difficult for Laura. In fact, she was oblivious to it. She thought we were connected even when it felt like we were a million miles apart. I remember saying to our first counselor of many, I never felt this frustrated by anybody before. Only Laura makes me feel this way. It has to be her fault. I was pretty sure. See, your marriage problems didn't begin in marriage. And this is going to be a big revelation. We talked a little about it last week. But you and your spouse are living out the patterns you learned in childhood. For each of you, a pattern of relating was set in motion long before you ever met. And they cause you to relate, those patterns cause you to relate in certain ways. Until we understand the powerful influence of our early years in predetermining our patterns, we're not able to understand our reactions or make changes. That's why it seems like we just keep on fighting about the same things. See, I was raised in an amazing Christian home, but my parents weren't perfect. They were broken people. Everybody in this world of ours is broken. My mom was the adult child of an alcoholic, and so what she taught me about love, it had a lot of control in it, a little bit of smothering, you know. It was a little overwhelming, but it was really close, really tight. And my dad's dad had committed suicide when he was 13, so he never really learned as a teenager what it meant to have a dad. Now, don't get me wrong, they were amazing parents. They were doing the best that they could, but I was learning how to get love from two broken people. We're all broken. In fact, I got some advice for you parents. You know, you've started that college fund for your kids. You might also want to start a counseling fund, you know? I just always suggest that. And I was talking to a guy the other day, and he was saying, yeah, my daughter just started going to counseling, and I was asking my wife, would you like to know what she's talking to the counselor about us about? And his wife said, no way, I don't want to know because I'm just going to feel like a failure. When Laura understood how I learned to feel and show love, she began to understand why her tendency to distance made me feel so rejected and so anxious. She was able to become more patient and loving when my anxiety triggered, and I understood myself better. And then as I listened to Laura's memories, I began to understand why she seemed so detached and distant at times, and I felt less rejected and anxious. I understood that this was a response that she had learned as a child. And much of the irritation that we had toward each other began to be replaced with a new understanding, even a compassion. In my marriage coaching, there's a crucial question that I've learned to ask. And it seems at first like it has nothing to do with marriage, but it has everything to do with your adult relationships. And here it is. So think about it for yourself. Can you recall being comforted as a child after a time of emotional distress? Your answer to this question could potentially reveal more about your relationships than any other insight that you might uncover. Now realize here, I'm not talking about just when you fell down and scraped your knee and they go, oh, a boo-boo, and put, a Band-Aid on it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, when you were significantly upset and a parent offered consolation and relief. You might be thinking, well, I had a happy childhood. I can't remember needing comfort a lot. But the fact is, we all experienced something emotionally upsetting during those first 18 years of life. It didn't have to be a major trauma. Maybe you broke up with a boyfriend. How did your parents handle it? Did they get with you and sit with you and go deep with you and the feelings that you had? Because it was traumatic to you, even if you were 15. Or did they just go, you don't even know what love is. You just puppy love, right? More common. Maybe your best friend moved, or you were disappointed because you didn't make the baseball team, or maybe a friend hurt or betrayed you, or maybe you faced something even more serious like a learning disability or a divorce or a death or a verbal or physical or sexual abuse that left you confused and upset and in need of comfort. Whatever happened at a specific time during your childhood, you either experienced comfort for your pain or the stark absence of comfort. And that representative memory influences your current relationships in untold ways. You see, if you haven't experienced real soul-level comfort, you'll have trouble understanding exactly what it is or how to give it to your spouse. And they did this huge study that found that if you hadn't experienced comfort, when you think about it, you're in the vast majority. 80% of adults couldn't remember a specific incident of being comforted in childhood. Another crucial question that I learned to ask: how was conflict handled in your family? For example, was there a time when you weren't getting along with one of your parents, or there was stress with a sibling, or something was causing tension in the family? Did that disagreement leave you feeling alone, disconnected from your parent or family? See, if you were fortunate enough to be a part of a family that acknowledged problems and successfully resolved them, then you learned an important lesson in life, and that is when conflict ruptures a relationship, repairing it brings relief. If not, when things go wrong in your relationships, you might have difficulty expressing yourself, finding solutions, feeling relief. If your parents held you, really listened to you, and helped you express what was going on inside, they gave you what I call soul words. Those are those deeper feelings, those deeper understandings of actually what's happening underneath the surface, what's happening inside of you. And if they validated you and resolved with you those problems, well, you'll have a healthy way to relate. Soul words, validation, so important in adult relationships. Being fully known and understood requires that we say aloud to someone else what is going on within our souls. If you trusted your parents and felt safe enough to share your inner self with them, you learned some soul words. They allow you to express what's going on deep in your heart and in your mind. See, here's the thing. Laura and I never did learn to feel and deal with a wide variety of emotions. That just wasn't in our family growing up. It was a lot more surface. And so even, especially Laura, it came to the point where she told me, she says, I don't even know what I'm feeling. I realize I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't even know what I've got anger. It's right on the top there. I've got that one. But see, that's an armored emotion that we use. It's not vulnerable. And so we go to that. That's our go-to for many of you. If you didn't have those soul words, you go to this anger, and it stays on the top because it's armored. It's not vulnerable. But underneath, there's something else going on, something deeper. Were you taught to feel and express and identify those feelings? The ability to console and bring relief to your spouse when he or she is upset and agitated is foundational to a close emotional bond. It's interesting. There was a landmark study by Ted Huston of the University of Texas. And this is what it said. When marriages fail, it is not increasing conflict that is the cause. It is decreasing affection and emotional responsiveness. But see, I think that God allows the pain so that we can grow, so that we can get unstuck, so that we can develop and become all that He wants us to be. So what we discovered was that distressed partners use different words, but they're always asking the same basic questions. We talked a little about it last week. Are you there for me? Will you be there when I need you, when I call? Do I matter to you? And what scientists and neuroscientists have found is that love is the best survival mechanism that there is. And if we feel disconnected from our partner, it's terrifying. And a lot of us don't even realize that it's fear that we're feeling, fear of abandonment, fear of this disconnection, fear of being alone, and we come out with this anger. But our past history with loved ones shapes our present relationships. In moments of disconnecting, we naturally turn to the ways that we learned as a child because that helped us survive. Remember last week I had you turn to each other and say, congratulations, you're a survivor. And it worked. I mean, you survived, but it's killing your adult relationships. And we have this tendency in a split second to go right back to we know what has worked. Our brain has developed a really strong pathway. This works. And we'll go back to that. Last week we talked about anxious and avoidant attachments. But I want to talk just a moment today about the childhood strategies we're still using that don't work now. There's several of them. One of them I call find the bad guy. Find the bad guy. If you came together and both of you kind of have an anxious attachment, when triggered, you'll tend to attack one another. Anxious plus anxious equals attack. We see it in the Bible in the Garden of Eden, all the way back at the very beginning. After Adam and Eve fell and sinned, remember they ate the fruit that God told them not to eat of, and God came and said, hey, what's going on? And Adam, what was his first response? It was the woman you gave me. She's messed up and she messed me up. You see how he pointed right away. Both partners define the other as somehow defective. Now, the purpose of find the bad guy is self-protection, but the main move is mutual attack, accusation, or blame. And this pattern starts when we feel vulnerable with our partner. Suddenly, we feel out of control. Emotional safety is lost. We're alarmed, and we use anything that promises to give us back this control. So we learn to do this by defining our partner in a negative way. We attack, either in reactive anger or sometimes we'll do it as a preemptive strike. Find the bad guy could also be called, it's not me, it's you. It's you. In my marriage coaching, some couples bring up detailed example after detailed example of each other's failures to prove their point. And we could sit there for weeks. One husband actually told me, he goes, whenever we fight, my wife gets hysterical. And I said, you mean hysterical? He goes, no, historical. She can remember everything that I've ever done, ever, you know. And the couple fights over whether these are true, whose behavior started this. The desire to win, to fight, to prove that others the bad guy creates a circle of criticism that has no beginning or end. The real truth is nobody wins this one. What does it matter if you can say, I was right? If the relationship ends, you both lose. I remember telling one guy, I think maybe you're right in this particular situation, but you're going to be the most right, most lonely guy in the universe here pretty soon. And it did end in divorce because he didn't make any changes. See, even if you win by proving the other is wrong, you lose. They're childish things. What do you need to do? Somebody, please choose to be the adult and stop that vicious cycle. The most common that we see pattern from childhood is what I would call protest and withdrawal. Protest and withdrawal. That's when an anxious attachment marries an avoidant attachment. That's what Laura and I have. I'm anxious, she's avoidant. And we can see that in our marriage. And I told you last week that anxious and avoidance are attracted like magnets. And so it's very likely that's your pattern. What does that look like? It's the most widespread. You're both attempting to connect, but you're terrible at it, just like Laura and I were. The anxious attachment usually starts, and it's about trying to get a response, any response. So the anxious partner reaches out, albeit in a negative way, and the avoidant steps back, and then the pattern repeats. Steps back, steps back. The pattern repeats forever because the emotions and needs behind the pattern are the most powerful on the planet. When anxious attachment gets no emotional response from the avoidant, we are wired to protest. It's all about trying to get a response that connects and reassures. And couples have a difficult time recognizing this pattern. The anxious partner is demanding, actively protesting the disconnection. The avoidant partner is withdrawing, quietly protesting the implied criticism. And dissatisfied partners, missing each other's signals, they'll talk about this constant tension. But this is not a power struggle. It's an attachment struggle. Rather than conflict or control, the issue is emotional distance. See, the avoidant partner feels threatened and attacked, and they go radio silent. And this silence sparks rage and aggression in the anxious partner. Let me give you some real life examples. The more he refuses to talk to me or dismisses my feelings, the angrier I get and the more I poke him, says one wife. Anything to get a response from him. And her husband picks up. And the more I hear that angry tone in her voice, the more I just hear that I can never please her. I just get hopeless and more silent. Our wired in deep need for attachment, for emotional connection, and the fear of rejection and abandonment keeps the pattern going. Even when our brains know that somehow we're making everything worse by continuing this pattern, we can't seem to switch off the automatic response. Well, how do we stop that? If you are the protester, the demander, ask God to help you recognize the pattern and tell yourself the truth. See your spouse as a little child protecting themselves. Unfortunately, it's from you. Then begin to express yourself softer and clearer, not negatively. Remember what you really want, connection. And if you're the withdrawer, see your spouse as a little child begging for emotional attachment. Be more responsive to their awful attempts, and I agree, awful. Choose not to hear their disappointments, their disapproval as a personal attack, but as a sign they're desperately wanting attachment and support and connection. It's not easy to do if you're the withdrawer to hear all that negativity coming at you like, oh, my sweet little wife, she just wants to connect with me. Doesn't feel like that, right? But that's what she's desperate to connect. And it's the spiral that's the enemy, not the other partner. It's this pattern. She's protesting her husband's distance. He's frantically trying to avoid her disapproval. But the question they're asking underneath it all is, are you there for me? If the faulty pattern continues, what we see is that eventually the demanding, protesting partner begins to give up the struggle for connection, grieves the relationship, and moves back. And this surrender leads into the last pattern before the relationship dies. The conflict pattern of what I call freeze and flee, or withdraw. No one's reaching for anyone. Both partners feel helpless. No one's taking any risks. It happens when the protest withdrawal couple, when the protesting partner gets tired of pursuing. And at this point, partners a lot of times are very polite to each other, even cooperative and pragmatic. But unless something is done immediately, the relationship is over. Eventually, what usually happens is the withdrawing partner finally realizes that even though things seem more peaceful and cooperative, there's now no emotional connection of any kind, positive or negative. And a lot of times that withdrawing partner will finally agree, you're right, we should go get counseling. But it's too late. The couple has waited too long to get help. See, there comes a point when there's no way to renew trust or revive a dying relationship. Now, which of these patterns sounds familiar to you? Which pattern do you see in your relationship? When a child cries, we respond. We prioritize this signal. Our children don't threaten us, and we accept that they are vulnerable and they need us. And we need to remember that we and our partners, we're just grown-up children. Even as adults, we still have that same need for connection. And the behaviors, whether it's demand or withdrawal, are attempts at communicating a real vulnerable need. But here's what's important. We have to see the underlying need, because what's on the surface is pretty ugly. It's angry, it's defensive, it's invulnerable. Listen to what the Bible says. The half-brother of Jesus wrote the book of James, and in James 5:16, he says, confess your offenses to one another and pray for one another so that you can be healed. So real practically, what does that look like? Let me just give you some steps. The hurt partner needs to speak his or her pain as openly and as simply as possible and go under the armored emotions. You probably saw anger, but what I really felt was, do you know what you really felt? See, it might take you a while. If you didn't grow up knowing those soul words, it might take you a while to figure out what it was. What I really felt was fear. What I really felt was this deep hurt. And then, number two, the listening partner stays emotionally present and acknowledges the wounded partner's pain and his or her part in it. Until the injured partner sees that this pain has been truly recognized, they won't be able to let go of it. Injuring partners now take ownership, this is the third thing, of how they inflicted this injury on their loved one and express regret and remorse. And this can't take the form of an impersonal or defensive apology, saying, look, I'm sorry, okay, in a cool tone. Or like, okay, I see what you're saying. You've got emotional problems. That's not it. To validate, to believe, we have to listen and engage with our lover's pain and show that it has an impact on us. Let me give you a real life example. The husband turns to his wife and says, and you can hear sadness and remorse in his voice, and you can see it on his face, and he tells her, I really let you down, didn't I? I wasn't there for you. I'm so sorry. I got all overwhelmed and left you to stare down your enemy by yourself. It's hard for me to admit this. I don't want to see myself as the kind of person, the kind of husband who would let you down like this, but I did. You had a right to get angry. I never saw my support as that important, but I see now. I hurt you very badly. I wasn't sure what to do. So I dithered and did nothing. I want to try to make this better if you'll let me. What is he doing that's so effective here? He makes it clear that he feels and cares about the pain that he caused. He explicitly tells the loved one that their hurt is valid, it's legitimate. And he owns up exactly to what he did that was so hurtful, even expresses shame. He feels dismayed and disappointed by his own behavior. And then he reassures his loved one that he's there now to repair this, to help him or her heal. And then number 4, the injured partners identify what they need right now to bring closure to this trauma. What is it that you need? And this brings a new sense of emotional connection. It acts as an antidote to the terrifying isolation that you feel in the separateness that the incident precipitated. Now, you might not know what you need. So let me just give you a little help with that. Ask yourself, if you're the injured partner, or even the other one who doesn't quite get it, what am I most afraid of? Taking the elevator down into your emotions, underneath all of your childish patterns of protection. It's risky. It's scary. Most of us didn't even know we had an elevator down. We thought it only went down to anger. No, it goes much, much deeper than that. Another real life example, continuing on with that same one. Angry seeming husband stares at the floor and sighs. I just want to keep everything under control. I get overwhelmed when she gets so upset with me, and then I start to feel lost. I don't know what to do. And the counselor, the coach says, what is the biggest catastrophe that could happen here? What are you most afraid of? And he has to think for a minute, but then he says, the word shattered keeps coming up in my head. If I stay and listen to my wife's upset, I will be shattered. I will lose control. The explosion will kill us. So you start with you identify the emotion. That basic emotion he's feeling right there is fear. The counselor would say, but what is this fear saying to you? Again, he has to think. I've tried so hard, but what I know how to do doesn't work. The more I try to get her to be reasonable, the worse it gets. So I feel helpless, really helpless. I'm good at everything I do, but I don't know how to do this. Guys, one of the reasons you're spending so much time at work, because you know how to do it and you're good at it. When you get home, you don't know what to do in relationship. And guys don't like it when they can't figure it out. But the husband turns toward his wife and says, I never feel sure of myself with you, and I need that. I feel very sad if I don't have you. And the husband actually begins to weep, and then the wife begins to weep. This is a couple that was just so angry at each other just moments before. What's happening? The husband's gone all the way to the ground floor, to deeper emotions of wanting a safe emotional connection with his wife, and he's shaping out a message out of his emotional turmoil. Now, too often when a couple is in turmoil, when one person takes a risk and opens up, the other partner doesn't see it or is afraid to trust it. And so they'll say something, well, let's see you prove it or something like that. No, that's not the right time. They're trying something new. The counselor or the coach would say, as the husband says, I don't know how to make this better. You don't have to fix anything to make it better. Your wife just needs to feel that you're here with her, to let her know that you care about her pain. So what am I most afraid of? The second question is, what do I need most from you? And this is a great leap of faith for those of us who've had little experience of real safety with others. So why would you even want to do it? Because your deepest longing that God wired into you when he created you was for connection with him and with one or two or three or four, especially that main one, others. And remaining defended and isolated is a sad and empty way to live. Why do it? Because underneath all that anger, you love each other. I want you to close your eyes for just a minute and think about what you most need in order to feel secure and loved. I'm just going to read some things off for you. Maybe you'll resonate with some of them. I need to know I am loved and accepted with my failings and imperfections. I can't be perfect for you. I need to know I am needed, that you want me close. I need to know I am safe because you care about my feelings, hurts, and needs. I need to know I can count on you to be there for me, to not leave me alone when I need you most. I need to know I'll be heard and respected. Please don't dismiss me or leap into thinking the worst of me. Give me a chance to learn how to be with you. I need to know I can count on you to hear me and to put everything else aside. I need to know I can ask you to hold me and to understand that just asking that is so very hard for me. The emotional bond forged here, something that many couples have never experienced. You can look back up. Psalm 119, 76 and 77 says, oh, love me. And right now, hold me tight, just the way you promised. Now comfort me so I can live, really live. Your revelation is the tune I dance to. Talking about connection with God, but it also means connection to each other. This trusting, this leaning into the other is what allows emotional connection to happen. And leaning allows you to take the weight off those old protections, those old childish patterns, to let go of the tightness and the rigidity of the old rules or the old story. Learning to lean is kind of like learning to float. Have you ever taught a child how to float in the water? It's incredibly difficult. First of all, there's no logical reason why anyone should believe that floating even works. Every child knows when you drop something in the water, basically sinks to the bottom. So when you tell them you want them just to lie there on top of the water, most of the time the kid will look at you like you've lost your mind. It makes no sense in their experience. It's a really gradual process. First, you have them lean against you. And when they trust you enough, then they'll lie on your outstretched arms with you holding their entire weight on your arms. And then gradually, oh so gradually, you begin to let that loose just a little bit. It's got to be gradual. Why? Because the minute the child gets scared, what do? They scrunch up and sink, and they shoot up and grab your neck, proving their own point that floating is impossible. It takes perseverance and patience. But amazing, they discover floating is possible. And it's incredible. It's so relaxing. It's like a miracle. I dare you, take the risk. Learn to float with each other. We have counselors in the lobby. There's a place out there. I want you to sign up. Do whatever it takes to learn to float together. We've got a podcast that starts tomorrow, Laura and I are doing, and you can download it early in the morning for your drive to work if you want to. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we'll have a podcast for you over these next weeks. And then Wednesday nights, we're going to have the in-depth marriage workshop that Laura and I and our counseling team is going to put together for you. Floating is possible. Laura and I are doing it right now, and it's amazing. Many of you are. Most of us aren't. I dare you. Step into God. Let him give you the will and the power. Do it together. Would you close your eyes with me? Let me pray for you. Father, I thank you for this deep and profound thing that you taught Laura and me that changed everything for us. And I ask that you would do the same in every marriage within the sound of my voice. Come, kingdom of God, upon our marriages. Be done, will of God, over our relationships. And let nothing stop the beautiful plan that you have for us to live out for the world what it looks like to know you and to truly, vulnerably, openly know each other. And let it be the sweetest thing, both of those relationships, yours and the one with our spouse, the sweetest thing in our life. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you, community of faith. We'll see you next weekend.